Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a customer engineer focused on management technologies. Today's discussion is part 3 of an ongoing series focused on endpoint protection in Configuration Manager, which of course is part of Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Today's discussion focuses on BitLocker integration and management that is provided through Configuration Manager. So a bit of an agenda as we get started, pretty common agenda for this series for sure. Before we get into the agenda, really to level set, why are we discussing this topic? Well, with any topic we discuss, it's to raise awareness of this capability that you have if you have Config Manager, in your environment. If you're using BitLocker for management, BitLocker is a built-in capability. The management of BitLocker is a built-in capability for Configuration Manager and Intune, but we'll get to Intune later. So making sure that you're aware of these capabilities, how to use them, is important. Could help with cost savings if you have a third-party disk encryption tool that you can just simply leverage what's built into Windows. Then that could be very much a cost savings for you. This could be something that your security teams want to be able to leverage. And so in that vein, you could use this and use something like role-based access to give them specific controls that they might need to be able to get into BitLocker policy and so on without needing to understand the rest of Config Manager. And so that's kind of where this is important, right? So as we go through this, we're going to talk about, first of all, what is BitLocker management? Most everyone probably is aware of what that is, but we'll talk about it. And then what is BitLocker and Config Manager integration for management? Why do we care about it? And then we'll get into some of the details about it as we go along. So what is BitLocker management? And this is just BitLocker management on its own, not talking about which product we're going to use to actually do the implementation of that management, whether it be Intune, whether it be Config Manager, whether it be MBAM. Really doesn't matter at this point, right? But what is BitLocker management? Why do we care? Well, being able to manage BitLocker at scale of enterprise level scale is really, really, really important, right? If you are going to use BitLocker to secure the devices on your, or the storage devices on your devices that you manage, then being able to do that on the enterprise level in a way that makes sense is important, right? Being able to manage BitLocker, sometimes users will get locked out of their devices, will need to enter a recovery PIN. So having options where the help desk has capabilities where they can leverage to help users is important. That's the help desk capability I mentioned. Being able to let users self-serve, helping themselves, which is the self-serve capabilities I mentioned there, is important. Escrowing your recovery key information so that if you do get into a bind and need to recover a drive that has been BitLocker encrypted, you have the means to do so. For example, I just not too long ago had a hardware failure and I needed to replace my hardware. Fortunately, I had the same make and model available to me. So all I did was swap out the RAM and the hard disks, which were BitLocker encrypted. So I used a recovery key to enable access to those drives and everything was just fine, right? Having management around the recovery key and so on. And then again, why BitLocker management? Well, the tool that historically was used for BitLocker management is MBAM. This probably should go on the next slide, to be honest, but in the next couple of slides, to be honest. But a tool that was used historically was MBAM. And so MBAM is it's on the path right now to be deprecated by 2024. And so having an alternate in place well ahead of that makes a lot of sense to make sure you have time for testing, planning, and so on. Config Manager is ready now. It's been ready since version 1910, much better now in the 2010 recent build, better yet in 2103. So definitely take a look at this as an option to help you in that management. All right, so what is BitLocker and Config Manager management specifically? Effectively, what this is the next step in management capabilities. In other words, we just mentioned MBAM is going to be deprecated. So making sure those MBAM capabilities that are dependent upon by so many enterprises are integrated and available through a tool such as Config Manager and Intune, but we'll get to that later, right, is important, right? Helping you reduce the infrastructure is also a big deal. With MBAM, there was a need to maintain a separate infrastructure, a separate MBAM database, and so on. That's not the case. With Config Manager, everything's already in place. We just add to what's needed in the Config Manager database and so on. And by the way, let me just go ahead and point out, right? Talking about BitLocker and Config Manager in this session, you're going to see MBAM a lot, right? MBAM is a separate tool. It is part of Microsoft Desktop Operations Pack, MDOP. It is being deprecated. So even though you will see MBAM in some cases in places in the console, in our documentation, and so on, this is not MBAM. This is Microsoft BitLocker management through Config Manager. So don't confuse the two. It's easy to do. Just like we still have pieces of Endpoint Manager that have the SMS label, right? This is no longer a product called SMS, nor is it called Config Manager. It's called Endpoint Manager, and Config Manager is a part of Endpoint Manager. So just to be clear on that, right? Also in the theme, what is BitLocker Config Manager management? We have a Config Manager database to consolidate everything that you need. We have the MBAM portals that are retained, so the help desk, the self-service portals. There's a third one which isn't really as noticeable kind of as a portal called the recovery service. You'll see that in a minute. Those portals are retained and just leveraged now in a different way through Config Manager, but they work the same way. Key encryption is supported. So keys are stored in the Config Manager database. So you have the ability to recover if you have a problem. Keys have the ability to be stored in plain text or encrypted if you want to do that. We'll get more into that a little bit down the line, right? Completely up to you whether you want to trust the security that is part of limiting access to the Config Manager database to begin with and just store it in plain text, or if you want to go that extra level and encrypt it. And if you wanted to, you could go the extra level and encrypt the entire Config Manager database, which would come with a likely performance hit, up to 25% performance hit, but it is possible and supported. So why do we care about BitLocker management? Well, when we're managing BitLocker and trying to have some consistency and some control over what that experience looks like for your end users, what your enterprise can expect from devices that are out there and running, we look toward automation. Trying to do this manually just doesn't make any sense, but having a way to coordinate encryption of volumes on disks across the enterprise, whether they're OS disks, whether they're extra disks, whether they're removable disks, whatever, makes sense. And that's what BitLocker management, again, generically provides to you. Security, being able to have your security officers quickly look at, determine compliance state of individual computers in the enterprise, being able to run audit reports and so on to access recovery key information. Your help desk will be tasked to help users when they have problems. We want through BitLocker management to reduce the load on your help desk and really help streamline the users to be able to self-serve, right? And empower them to continue to work anywhere with the assurance that they are completely covered. So why BitLocker now focused on Config Manager? Well, automation, still that big part. Config Manager enables that automation. You can use the existing infrastructure. Like I mentioned, no need to keep that extra infrastructure along. Reporting, so there are BitLocker specific reports, both in the normal reporting node and in one of the portals that you will see is the auditing report. And Config Manager, frankly, is your path forward. Mentioned that standalone MBAM has been deprecated. Its end of life will be 2024, right? So the reason for that is to give you plenty of time to migrate, but know that date is coming, and it will be here probably sooner than you realize, and you want to have something in place to replace that as that date gets closer. So what are the, okay, so now we're shifting to BitLocker and Config Manager integration specifically. So what are the requirements for Config Manager BitLocker integration? At minimum, you need Config Manager 1910. I previously did a session right when Config Manager 1910 was introduced, and much of what I'm going to talk about today is the same. But there are some definite differences that have been added as we've gone through, to 2002, to 2006, and now to 2010, and soon 2103. 2103 is not yet released as of this recording, but I know some things that are coming there, right? So we have consistently improved the BitLocker integration capability. You need an SSL management point or an SSL enabled management point. What does that mean? Whenever you were first seeing this in 1910, it was a hard requirement that your management point had to run in SSL mode. All of your clients had to be then PKI enabled. That's very workable and possible to do, but many organizations are not at that level yet, right? And they may not ever be. So it was really a bit of a roadblock, big roadblock for some organizations to adopt BitLocker management in their enterprise through Config Manager because of that requirement. Now, as of 2006, I believe, maybe 2002, can't remember. Either way, it doesn't matter, right? If you're on 2010, you definitely have all this. We added the ability where you do not have to have the entire management point SSL enabled. As long as you have the SSL certificate generated and bound to the top level website, generally the default website, you can leave the entire management point in standard port 80 mode, HTTP mode, and the clients in standard port 80 mode, and you're good. Then your recovery website, which you'll see all this in a minute, will leverage that 443 certificate, and everything works, right? No problem. You also need a reporting services point if, in fact, you're going to leverage the reports that come along with BitLocker. You can do that. Oh, wait, one thing before I leave the SSL and so on. I'll mention this throughout. A question that will come up, I have it, is, hey, I've got my infrastructure configured for enhanced HTTP. Is enhanced HTTP supported for BitLocker management? And the answer today, as of 2010, is no, not really. A little bit, yeah, but no, not really, right? Why is that? Because when you have enhanced HTTP turned on, then you will see, I'll show you in a minute, when you go to the management point, port 443 will be bound to a certificate that's generated and placed by Config Manager. The client does not trust that cert. You can make the client trust that cert, but still, there's some challenges, right? So as of 2010, you have two choices. Either the management point is in full SSL mode over port 443, or the management point is in port 80 mode over HTTP, and you have a certificate generated and applied bound to the management point that can be used, right? The good news is in version 2103, we will fully support enhanced HTTP, but that's still not released as of this recording, right? Okay, so the reporting services point, if you want to leverage the reports that are available for BitLocker, and you likely do, you will need an IIS server, both for hosting the recovery point. That will go on your management points. All of your management points will have that likely. And then you'll have the self-service portal and the help desk portals, right? Okay. And then finally, you need sufficient permissions to be able to get everything installed. Now, in terms of components, these are the components that make up BitLocker integration into Configuration Manager. You need Config Manager 1910 or better, as we stated. You really want 2010 or 2103 when it releases. You want to stay current, right? But there you go. You need the web portals. And so really there are three web portals. There's the help desk web portal. There's the self-service web portal. Those are the ones that get the main play when we talk about web portals. But there's also the recovery service, which is the part that plugs into your management points. and that's what facilitates key storage in the database. The piece that is added to your management point is SMS_MP_mbam. There you see mbam again. That will not be there until you deploy your first policy that has client configurations that are part of it. I'll show you that in a minute. You also need your mbam client. So this is going to install on your managed nodes. It will not be there until you deploy your first policy to your client. And then it will be noticed that the mbam client's not there and will get installed at that time, right? So you don't have to worry about it. It will just take care of itself, but it does need to be there. And I'll show that to you. You also need a certificate. So this is used to provide secure communication. Again, you can have a full management point. You can have a management point that is not fully SSL and so on. And the certificate that we generate will be used for both. It is going to be bound to port 443. So the recovery service web page can use that detail and encrypt the BitLocker information into the config manager database, right? And then finally, SQL scripts. Now, I guess technically these are optional because what these scripts will do is help you generate certificates, import, export certificates, and so on for the purpose of encrypting data related to BitLocker in the config manager database. All right. Okay. So a couple of how it works things. So top level, how does this work? So basically, you will have your admin who's going to go and create BitLocker configurations policy, deploy that, right? The policy is going to get deployed. If this is the first BitLocker deployment policy that has been set, the management point will install the mbam components. Again, assuming the client authenticate or client settings are set correctly in the policy, not client settings for the site, but client settings tab within the policy. All right. And then we're going to have our client going to retrieve that policy. And if this is the first time it's seen a BitLocker policy, when that policy is executed, the mbam agent will be installed. Drives will get encrypted with the options provided. Keys will be stored in the database, and your help desk or users can interact with the portals that are provided just fine, right? Okay. And then here's a bit of a life cycle. I just lifted this straight out of our docs, just kind of showing you what you need to consider for BitLocker management, right? All right. So now let's get into the fun stuff. I will tell you that this is going to be multiple levels of configuration that we need to do. It's not hard. Don't be nervous about it, but there are just a few pieces that we need to put in place. The first part will be talking about implementing the recovery service, validating that, and how it works with the client and so on. And frankly, I will probably talk about portions of this multiple times just to make sure that you have the opportunity to hear it a couple of times. Then the next part would be preparing for the portal installations. That will be the help desk and the self-service portal, and then actually doing the installation. Then we're going to talk about the encryption of recovery data. This is totally optional, right? But I want to show you how to do it. And then we're going to create a policy and deploy that and then monitor that policy as it's gone out. And then we're going to, if we haven't covered it already, we're going to go back and see it in action. So we'll just see how it flows through all of that. But again, and really this one should be optional too. You don't have to have the self-service and the help desk portal. In practice, you really want the help desk and the self-service portal, but you don't have to have them. All right. Okay, so let's jump into the recovery service. Now, I kind of struggled with where exactly to plug this in, because in truth, the first thing that's going to happen, as you saw in the diagram of the flowchart, is an admin's going to go create BitLocker management policy. That's the thing that kicks off everything, right? But you kind of want to make sure your infrastructure is ready first. And so I went ahead and created a policy that effectively doesn't do anything except it triggers the recovery service to be installed. So I'm going to start with the recovery service, and then we'll kind of weave in other things as we go along, right? Another thing, so as we talk about the recovery service and the different configuration options, one thing that's absolutely true, as I mentioned, is you need a cert. I'm not going into how to obtain that cert in this session. There's lots of documentation on how to do sample certs and so on, and there may be third-party certs that you're using from a third-party CA, and there are requirements there. Suffice it to say, the cert that I'm going to use is based off the web server template, and it's going to be used for server authentication. Right. All right. Let me pull in the config manager site server real quick, and we will take a look. And here is the config manager site server, right? So a few considerations as we get started. So remember, the MBAM website that you're going to see is installed only after the first BitLocker policy is deployed, and for a policy that has the client deployment portion configured. If for some reason you were to configure a policy, which you haven't seen yet, but you'll see in a minute, and the client deployment portion was not configured, then your MBAM website will not get deployed at all. That's a requirement, right? Another point. Hopefully most customers don't have any replica management points in the environment anymore. My customer did for a while until we really showed that the performance of the system without the replica management points actually increased significantly. So hopefully you don't have any replica management points out there. If you do, just know replica management points are not supported, right? If you're using those, you need to make sure the recovery service website on the replica management point is disabled, and at least one non-replica management point is configured and has an accessible recovery service running. Better yet, just get rid of the replica management points because you likely don't need them at all. Right? Starting in Config Manager 2010, the current release, clients connected via the Cloud Management Gateway are absolutely fully supported for BitLocker management. And then again, there's two configuration options. One is to have the management point and clients fully configured for SSL, required for 2010. That was quickly modified so that we have the ability to not do that in later versions. And then so the other choice is on the management point itself, have the cert provisioned, and then have the management point running in port 80 mode, clients in port 80 mode, and just have the MBAM recovery site working with that cert that's been provisioned. And in fact, that is how the lab is configured. So let me take you through this for a minute. So here, I just noticed somewhere the site went away. That's okay. Back to the VM hosting our site server. So let's start with the idea that we're going to have our management point in full SSL mode. What does that mean? And I'll just tell you in advance, I don't have that configured here. But if I wanted to configure that, first I would need to go to my administration, servers and site system roles, and I would go to my management point here, and I would make sure that it was configured for SSL. It is not configured for SSL. I'm not going to configure it for SSL. I don't need to have it in SSL, right? Well, I guess the first thing I would do even before that is I would go provision a certificate and bind it to my my management point. So I do have the cert provision. Again, not going to go through exactly how to do that, but I do have my cert provision, and it's bound to my default website. So here it is, right? If I edit that, you will see this is the cert that is bound. If I view it, you will see that it comes from the template that I provided, the web server template that I provided, no problem. I mentioned that I had my site previously configured for enhanced HTTP. When you do that, what happens is this particular cert is automatically generated by the Config Manager site, and it's bound to port 443, and that is not something that we can use in version 2010 for BitLocker, right? This one is the one that we need to use, so bear that in mind, okay? Now, if I wanted to continue and make sure that everything was working in full SSL mode, I would change over my management point to be an SSL. I would force my clients over to SSL, make sure the certs are provisioned accordingly, and the clients would just switch whenever they can. They use the most secure method they can, so that's not that hard. But again, most customers don't want to do that. So that's not what I have configured here, right? I just show that to you for completion. Now, what I do have configured is that my environment is running in HTTP mode over port 80, right? And my MBAM site has already been provisioned because I've created sample policy and it's been listed. So here it is out here, right? MBAM is out here. So this doesn't change. I still need to get the cert and bind it to port 443, but everything else on the management point is running in port 80 mode except this. And so when you install, or whenever you create policy and the MBAM portal recovery site is installed, it will be installed with these default settings. You don't have to go change these. Don't go mess with these for troubleshooting. If something's broken and not working, it's not these settings, right? Require SSL and ignore client certificates. So don't mess with these. You don't need to change anything about it, but because these are out here and they're working. Right? Now, how do I know if all of this is working? Well, there's a couple of ways. So there's a couple of ways. One, now that we have this all out here, I just want to walk you through and show you that everything's working. Oh, one last thing on the management point before we head over there, or on the IIS server. When the MBAM piece installs, it's going to install its own app pool. That is running under network service. Never change that, ever, 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 ever. It doesn't need to be changed. If you change it, it will break. And if you're having problems with your implementation, it's not because you have network service set here. Network service is what you need, right? So how do we, or what do we do then on the client? Is there something we need to do, on the client or understand on the client? So let's switch over to a client and see. So here is one of my clients. Let's just pop it open. All right, we'll connect. All right, let's log in. So while that's logging in, a few considerations. So you just saw me, hopefully, using a virtual machine for my clients, for my server, and everything else. I'm doing that for testing. MBAM agent is absolutely not supported on VMs. Not at all, right? Now, I can make it work. You're going to see me make it work. It's not supported because it takes likely some manual intervention. And so it's not something you're going to want to do. But for demonstrating, it's fine, right? For testing, it's maybe okay, but you'll want to get some physical devices in there for sure. Right. Also, in terms of configuring, again, you have to factor in those options. Is your management point in full SSL mode or is it not? And if it's in full SSL mode, you're going to have certificates provisioned to the client. We're not going into that in this session at all because I don't have my lab configured in this manner at all. But you would need to do that. If you're in non-SSL mode, then you just install the client as normal and make sure it's running and that it's communicating, and then also make sure it trusts the web server authentication certificate you issued to the management point. Two options for issuing the cert. Either use your own on-prem CA, which is fine, but you have to then make sure your Windows clients trust certificates issued from your on-prem CA. It's not a hard process. It just means getting the root certificate from your CA and putting it in the trusted certificate authority store on the client, or use a third-party CA, which the clients likely will automatically trust by default. So either way, right? Then you need to factor in the Cloud Management Gateway. The Cloud Management Gateway absolutely is supported in 2010 or better, and so you can do that. Now, I'm here, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you a couple of things, right? So the first thing is you already saw that my management point is running in HTTP mode. I'm going to go show you CCM messaging. CCM messaging is the component on the client that communicates forward with the management point. So I should be able to tell a message or something that has been sent. You can already tell that I'm using my on-prem management point here. Let's see, let me find one. Shouldn't take me too long. There, outgoing message. So outgoing message, if I scroll over, is delivered successfully. So we know that communication is flowing. We also know that that we have the client running in just port 80 mode or HTTP mode. Why? Because I'm using a self-signed cert. If I were in HTTPS mode, I would have a PKI entry here, right? Okay. So we'll be back to that in just a minute. All right, so I'm going to pull the client out of the way for now and make sure I haven't missed anything. All right, so we want to validate. Once we get all this set up, we want to, and configured, we want to validate everything is where it should be, right? So let's start back at the site server. So I've already shown you the website here in IIS, right? How do I know that the website has actually been installed? Well, there's a couple of ways. First of all, you can look at the logs like for anything. Usually, you can go into the logs. And so I want to pull open the Config Manager site server logs, and there's two logs of interest. First is site-comp. And this one I thought I was going to show you, but it rolled out before I could. And this isn't the primary log anyway. But site-comp is what kind of controls all the different components of the site and initiates the website install, right? So you can absolutely see an info message in the site-comp log that will be triggering the install of the website. Now, the actual component that does the install of the website is MP control. So if we go into MP control, then we can see a few things. Let's just kind of search for a minute with my favorite log viewer called Notepad. And so if we search down for verify, right, we can see that periodically the MP control component is going to go verify that the MBAM recovery and hardware service is installed. In this case, it's not, because I've just pushed policy to it to cause it to be installed. So the next thing we do is say, hey, okie doke, we need to install this thing, and we're going to go call PowerShell and this PowerShell command and get the website installed, right? And so this is where the script is. This is another thing that you can see. Don't go mess with the script. This script is not your problem. If you're having problems, it's not in this script. You know, this script is running on thousands of different environments, and so it's not your script. You don't need to modify that. Just trust it. What I have seen, what one of my colleagues have seen, what we have seen, is a customer was struggling with this, and it just wouldn't run. You would get errors here. And they went and ran the script manually and then kind of got some diagnostic reasons as to why that was failing, corrected that, and we were good, right? So that's a fair thing to do, to run the script manually if you need to for troubleshooting, but don't change anything in the script, right? Then once we do that, then we need to make sure the management point is healthy and communicating. And so still in the same log, MP control, I'm just going to go, well, I'll just search here. Test, right there is good enough. So periodically, the management point will test itself. And so HTTP test request succeeded. That's the management point validating that it is running, right? And so you want to make sure that the management MP control log is actually showing that everything is working correctly on the IIS site. And so it should be eligible to receive communication. Now back on the client, we want to check the logs there too. And so I showed you already, but I'll show it to you again, CCM messaging. This is the log that takes all of the messages from the client going to the management point and actually copies them up. So if you're going to have problems communicating with the management point, then you will see them in this log, right? So this is a great log for a lot of different reasons. And then back to the site server. Once we confirm that the actual MBAM site, the recovery service site, is present in IIS as it is. We want to test it maybe to validate that it's working. And so that's easy enough. All you need to do is go to https:// the FQDN of your management point, and I already have it in history here. And so this is the test URL you would want to use. Of course, substitute your own management point name, and it's going to prompt you for credentials. So I'm going to say use a different account, and here, right? And so if that works, you should get a website popped up just like this, and you did. And so we are good, and this is a functioning service. Now, to know if your client has received the correct pointer to this website, I don't know why it does that, then you can open the registry and look at it and validate. So if we go to regedit, all right, so here's the registry key you want all the way down. And then in here, there's the key recovery service, and you see that it's pointing to my server as it should. So this is a great place to validate that the MBAM agent is actually communicating with the recovery service at the place you expect. Why is this important? Well, maybe for a number of reasons, but one might be that you were previously using MBAM and you wanted, or you're trying to migrate over to the Config Manager management pathway, but yet you wonder if your clients are actually shifted over and using the Config Manager recovery service location. Well, it's easy enough. Crack open the registry, and you can validate here that in fact they are using the correct location. All right. So that is configuring the recovery service. All right. So that's getting the recovery service configured, and that's most of the configuration infrastructure side that is required, except we do have the portal installation on the server side. This is, again, optional. It really isn't optional because it makes a whole lot of sense to use these portals, but it truly is an option. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. So a couple of things as we get through. So in this procedure, we're going to install the portals for you, right? The server that we're going to use to host the portal is going to be the same management point server that you just saw. That is not a requirement for these portals. You can use whatever IIS server you would like to designate for that purpose, no problem, right? Another key, starting in Config Manager 2006, you can now deploy these portals at your CAS if you have a CAS. Prior to that, you would have to install these on primary sites, right? So now you have options. So basically, to start with this, you want to identify the IIS servers that will actually host these portals. Again, does not have to be a Config Manager server. Let me bring the server back in. But what you do need on these servers is certain components installed. So let me go to Server Manager. And there's two components for sure that you'll need. So add, remove roles, go in here, next, 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 and next. And you're going to see that you have .NET that, well, so you might not, but you need .NET 4.5, and so 4.7 covers that, and you need .NET 3.5, all components. So make sure all components are in there. The other thing you need is ASP.NET, specifically MVC 4.0, right? So you might be tempted to think you can do that with Server Manager, and you can do that, but once you install the portals, they will not work, right? Instead, what you need to do is go to docs.microsoft.com. In fact, here it is. Here's the URL. And there's a downloadable for MVC4, ASP.NET and MVC4. This is what you need. If you don't have this, you will get errors in your help desk and self-service portals, right? So be aware of that. So go ahead and download that. Another thing, for these portals, the use of SSL is recommended, absolutely not required. I'm not going to use SSL in the demos. So now, once we've identified the IIS server to host the portals and are ready, how do we, and we know we have all the prereqs installed and so on. How do we go about installing the portals? Pretty easy, right? So if this is all done by script. So the first thing you need to do is go retrieve the scripts that you're going to use to install the portal. So I'm going to go to the Config Manager installation directory. Config Manager, and then x64 here, and then I'm going to look for mbam. And so the first thing that comes up is the recovery site. This installs that recovery site. That's not what you need. You need these two, the cab and the PS1. You want to copy those out somewhere, probably, and so I went ahead and moved them out over here. Now I've got this installed, and so there's no harm, no foul if I rerun this. I don't really want to for my lab because I've already got it installed. But there's a few things that I want to call out that you need to be mindful of. So let me pop open our friendly editor called Notepad. Not that one. Sorry, click the hourglass or click the magnifier. So let's pop up Notepad. And so there's several different options for the script that you can use, right? Depending on the site design, but depending on what you need to do, you might need to use different ones of them, but there are some caveats. So let me start with a generic example that kind of walks you through the different command line options. So here is a list of the different options that you might have, right? So you see, for example, that there's one up here for SQL instance name. Okay, you might be tempted to use that. And if you have a named instance of SQL running, you need to use that. But if you don't, omit that. Some customers have tried, well, customers who have tried to use it end up causing themselves great grief because it will not install anything and get you into maybe hard to chase down error kind of thing. So do not use SQL instance name if you're using the default instance of SQL, right? And then also in terms of the group names. So report the help desk users group, the admins group, the mbam report users group, whatever. Make sure these are domain user groups and make sure that you have them properly named and properly configured before you run the script. In terms of proper name, whatever you want, just don't put spaces in it, right? And then also make sure, again, domain user group, that is a global group, right? And so we've had some customers who've tried to use domain local groups, and that ends up in grief because it causes errors. And here's the thing, the script, even if you have the groups misconfigured, it may very well, it probably will take your configuration and just run and try to use whatever you've said. So there's no error checking per se or validation at runtime when the script runs to make sure all the groups are okay. So here's the specific example that I use to configure the portals in my lab, right? So I use these. So here it is, SQL Server name. I do not have a SQL instance name. I have here, this is my database name. Here's my report server URL. Here are my group names. Again, make sure that these are global groups. Make sure you're referencing them by the NetBIOS name, not the FQDN. And I'm saying to install both. So I've installed it and previously, so I'm not going to run through that again. Frankly, I could. No harm, no foul in doing that. It would just redo everything. If the websites are already there, it would uninstall them first and then it would reinstall them. So really no issue with that at all. So let me show you that I have these portals already installed, right? So if I go back to my IIS server, under my management point, I have help desk, I have self-service. So again, you don't have to have them as part of your management point. I just do because it's convenient. And so to make sure they're installed correctly, you can go to them and so http://srv. Here we do. I have the help desk here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop it open. And so it's going to ask me for credentials. So I'm going to go and provide my credentials. All right, good. So it's going to pop open. So this is my help desk portal. I have access to my audit report if I want. I have my drive recovery stuff that I can access. I have my TPM management stuff that I can deal with. So I'm not going to really dig into these portals, but just showing you that it is installed. And then if I want to go to my other portal, easy enough, I just backspace over and go to self-service. And then, in theory, we'll go there. And so here's my self-service portal, and we should be good to go. So I would, put in whatever text I want, and then, okay, I've read, good, go continue, all good. And so this is where my user would be able to self-serve, getting their BitLocker stuff resolved, right? So good enough. Right? Those two portals are, in fact, working. Now, if something is going wrong and I need to troubleshoot what's going on, well, there's a couple of places that I can go. One is we have an event log, and so I can go to Event Viewer. I can go to Event Viewer, right? Pretty easy, and then navigate down to Applications and Services, and then Microsoft, and then Windows, and then MBAN. So here's our event log or two event logs that we can use right here. Right. Now, be careful on the event log side. There are certain phantom errors that will show up here that best anyone can tell are completely meaningless, like maybe SPN errors, right? You can go do whatever you think you need to do to fix those, and you're not going to get rid of those events. So the key is, are your websites working correctly? There's another where you will see that it's failing to find a stored procedure. I don't know why that's happening. The best guess I have is that because this was built to look for stored procedures in the MBAM database, which we don't have anymore in the Config Manager environment. So it just fails because it doesn't think it can find the stored procedures, right? Okay. Then there's also logs that you can use. And so if you browse into the inetpub directory here, then you will see the BitLocker stuff, and you will see help desk and self-service, and then logs for the help desk and self-service. So if you look at these, you'll notice this is an SVC log. Yeah, you can open it in Notepad, sure. It's not going to be all that helpful to you. It's going to be a long string of XML, and it can be quite a busy log if you've had errors and different things. The better way to open it is to use a tool like SVC Trace Viewer that you can find. And so I don't have much interesting in my logs, but if I go to open one, let's just open maybe the self-service. See what's there. Really not much of anything, right? There's little here. And so if you don't have an error, you're going to have very little information here. But if you do have an error, this can be very helpful to you to troubleshoot as to why you might have that particular error, right? Okay, so that's setting up the portals. And so now we have the portals installed, we have them verified. And so now we need to go and encrypt, if we choose to, the data in our database. And so this involves running SQL scripts in the environment. And so these SQL scripts, again, are very well vetted. And so don't think you need to go and change anything in the SQL scripts, because you don't. And then, we can look elsewhere if there's troubleshooting concerns. And so again, I've already got things encrypted in my database. I'm still going to go in and show you how to do this because I want to, right? And so here's my SQL server. I'm going to do a new query. We'll come back to that one a little bit later. And so there's really 4 queries that you're going to want to run. The first one is to generate your SQL cert. And what that SQL cert is going to do is to encrypt your BitLocker recovery keys, your BitLocker recovery packages, your TPM password hashes. So there are certain things that you need to adjust to make sure that that it runs in your environment, but pretty easy updates to do. So here's the first SQL script. Let me go get it copied onto my clipboard so I don't have to bore you typing it. Let's get it on the clipboard. I know I'm going to have some syntax errors here that I'm going to have to correct real quick. I thought I'd saved all these off with the right syntax, but I know this one, maybe it's just this one that I need to fix. We will see. We will see. Did that do it? No. All right, let me fix the syntax real quick. It all boils down to using the correct single quotes, because that was it. I thought I had it all saved off that way, but either way. So I'm going to execute that, and it executed fine. So this is the stored procedure to go create the certificate. Then what I need to do is back up my certificate, right? And why do I need to back it up? Because maybe I'm generating this on one database and I want to use it across multiple databases. So I would then want to back it up and restore it. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the query. And this is all documented for you, by the way. The query that will support backing things up. All right, so it looks like I might have some issues here. Let me fix those like I did the other. I'll be back. Okay, it took me a second, but it's now you see that syntactically it's correct, and it ran the, one of the problems that I ran into too is I had still a file named what I was trying to save it out as on my directory, so I had to remove that. But anyway, this is where I'm exporting the key. Now, the next thing I need to do is possibly import the or restore from backup the key, or the cert. So let me go ahead and show how to do that. Hopefully I won't have any syntax errors on this one, but I'm sure I might. So let's do this. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lift this from the documentation, and I will change things and be back. Okay, so that script executed without any problem at all. So that is basically recovering things. And then finally, if I want to verify that I've done everything correctly, which you do, right, then you can use this one. So this one, I think, will have one syntax issue that I need to fix, and that will be it. So let's just paste it in. There you go. And so, yeah. Let me get rid of that. I think I need to change that and change this right here. And then we should be golden, I believe, unless it's going to cause me grief here. Let me do this over here too. And there, so that works, right? And so if we run this and it's successful and says everything's okay, then we're going to get a return of 1. We got a return of 1, which tells us that everything was configured successfully for our SQL database to encrypt the recovery data. And so that is now operational. Our recovery data will, in fact, be encrypted. All right, now, so on to the fun stuff. So we're going to go create our encryption policy, and then we're going to deploy it and see it run in our environment. So back to our site server. And in our console, we're going to go to Assets and Compliance, and then we're going to scroll down to BitLocker Management, and we're going to see that we have our policy already created. I already had it there. Just to create the recovery service. So let's go look at it. So I don't have much configured here, right? I do have the setup, kind of setup configured. You can look at the options. This section is for Windows 7. So if you don't have Windows 7, you can ignore this. This is for Windows 10. And here's where you can create the encryption algorithms. We default to 128-bit if we don't have something else configured. And so I'm doing 256-bit. Keep that in mind. It will become important in a minute. I don't have anything else configured under here. I also have the operating system drive configured, right? And these options, I'm not going to go through every one. You can go through them yourself, but just showing you. And then client management. This is the tab that I said has to be configured. Otherwise, you will not get a deployment of the MBAM recovery site if it's not already there. And then I don't have anything for fixed drive, and I don't have anything for removable drive, right? And I do have this, I do have this deployed. And so it's deployed to my all Windows 10 systems collection. And so easy enough. Now, on the device, where does this show up? So if I go to the device and look at the Config Manager applet in the control panel, then we'll see it is a configuration, right? So in Config Manager, we'll see it's a configuration. This means it's a configuration item. And what you can tell is it is currently not compliant, right? Now, I showed you previously that I do not have BitLocker enabled here. I'll show it to you again. And I do not have the m.agent installed. And I'll show that to you again, right? So under Programs and Features. And so I don't have that installed either. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate the policy, which is not going to do anything because I'm on a VM. Normally, when the policy would get evaluated, it would go do something. What it might be doing is installing the m.agent. And so we'll see. So it installed the m.agent. It's not actually going to start encrypting the drive, though, because I'm on a VM. Now, I can go ahead and force it to encrypt the drive. And the key will be to see what the encryption level is after we're done, because I've said 256. So I'm going to do manage BDE -on until it's C drive. And it's going to say, okay, hey, great, you've got to make sure the hardware passes. It's going to tell me a restart's required. And so I've actually got this deployed on another machine. I'll just restart this one, and it will start encrypting whenever it comes back up. So I'm going to put that aside. We may come back and check that. We may not, because again, I have another machine where I can show you the results of the encryption. But I do want to show you how you can monitor it. Now, normally, if you weren't in a lab like I am, you could wait and the compliance percentage would go up as you have devices that adhere to your BitLocker policy. In my case, I'm just not caring. Another section you could go to is monitoring. So I mentioned that there are reports. For some reason, I don't have them deployed here, but I didn't really care because I wasn't going to spend much time in them anyway, since they're not that meaningful for my lab. But definitely take a look at your BitLocker reports. They will provide some very useful information for you, that along with the audit report that's available in the help desk portal, right? So now, just to show you, I should be in the middle of encrypting. This will take a little bit, and again, may not finish by the time that we're done with this session, but we'll see. Right. Okay, so let that log in, and then we will see. All right. So let's pop into the control panel and see what's happening with our encryption. So BitLocker drive encryption should come up, and we are currently encrypting. So we know that everything's working again. The key will be, how are we encrypted after we get finished, right? So that one's in progress. I mentioned I have a second client, which is also a client of the Cloud Management Gateway. So let me show you that device for two reasons. One, to show you the end result of encryption, and also to show you that this is a Cloud Management Gateway connected client that was in a little bit of a challenging cycle a moment ago. Let's see if that's resolved itself. I quit it. If I can type my password right. Maybe. All right. So let's get that logged in. Here we go. All right, so I do have BitLocker encryption on this device. So I have BitLocker on. And then also, this device is a Cloud Management Gateway device. How do I know that? Because I show that I'm always internet, and I also don't show a particular management point I'm dealing with, which is a good telltale for being on the cloud. I have the BitLocker policy here, so everything's good so far. And then if I go to my CCM messaging log, hopefully it's communicating now. It was having a little bit of an issue a bit ago, but nonetheless, we're good. Let's see. So outgoing message, let's see what that's doing. Outgoing message delivered successfully. So we know that we're communicating with our Cloud Management Gateway. Here's the Cloud Management Gateway, right? So this is a Cloud Management Gateway connected device. And so BitLocker drive encryption is fully supported now in version 2010 on a CMG connected device. Now, how do I know that my BitLocker policy is the one that caused it to encrypt? Easy. If I just do manage BDE and then status, it'll tell me I've got 256-bit encryption, and that only happens because my policy is telling it to be 256-bit encryption. So I know everything's working now from that perspective, and so I'm good, right? Okay. Now, moving on. So I've already shown this to you. I always tend to do this. I kind of step forward, and I've shown this to you in action already, but I do want to show you a couple of things, right? So we have encrypted our drives. Actually, did I do all of, yeah, I think I've done all of the things I wanted to show you for the in action part. Let me make sure. Yeah, okay, so let me go forward. There's a few more things that I want to show you. We're starting to wind down. We're not there yet, right? In terms of troubleshooting tips and tricks. So we have initiated BitLocker encryption on our Cloud Management Gateway connected device, on our on-prem connected device, and the goal is that our encryption key will get escrowed into the Config Manager database. That has in fact happened in my testing previously. And so if I go to my SQL server, then there's a query that I can run just to show the table. Let me get rid of that. Right, run this query, and there's a couple of BitLocker tables, but I can run that, and you'll see that the detail is here. I can translate all this if I need to, no problem. You know, ID, last time, volume ID, recovery key. You can tell that it's all in there, and so on. Right. So this is happening. We are escrowing. The recovery service is working the way that it should. Another thing that's interesting, and I've shown this in various forums, but it's worth talking about just for understanding, if nothing else. When you enable BitLocker, right, there's a log on the client called the BitLocker management handler. And so one of the things that's interesting, we see that the BitLocker policy is implemented on the client as a configuration. Well, a configuration is a configuration item. And in the log, we'll say processing policy, and we're going to give you the actual detail of the configuration. And so if you need to, for whatever reason, you can easily go back to the database and look for it. So I'm just going to go in here and do a select, first of all, select star from CI underscore configuration items there, right? And run that. And so what I'm interested in is this particular column, CI underscore unique ID. This does not look like what I've captured to my clipboard, but if we scroll down a decent ways, we'll start to see that it in fact does, right? So, well, there we go. We start to get into some of that, right? So if I want to find the one particular configuration that I'm interested in, I can do CI unique ID equals, and then this long string, and execute, and it's going to pull up the one configuration. Well, if I go to the SDM package digest, it's going to pull up an XML representation of this particular configuration. So I can read it there. I can go into my favorite editor. I'm going to put it in Notepad, and you can literally go through the entire configuration as it's being configured and sent down to the machine, right? And we won't do that here. I just think that's really cool that you can get into the database and see it. And as always, when we're in the database, it's for instructional purposes only. Don't mess with it. You can easily break things if you do, but wanted to show it to you. Now, so the back to the logs, right? So I've shown you some logs. I want to rehash those as we're starting to close down. So we're on the site server. And so we do have logs. And so the recovery service logs, if we are on the C drive and then go into program files and then go into our directory that houses management point stuff, SMS underscore CCM, and then go to logs. We're going to have Microsoft, where is it? Oh, sorry, went to the wrong place, not logs. Microsoft BitLocker management solution. Then we're going to have logs here for the recovery and hardware service that we can go look at. These are SVC logs as well, so you'll need SVC trace to be able to open them up, but still you can see what you need to see. So those logs are there in case you need to. And I wonder if there's anything useful in here. Let's just take a peek at our trace viewer. All right, so let's open those. I haven't looked at them, honestly, before I started this, so let's see what we see. So logs, Microsoft, keep on going back. Keep on going back. Okay, so program files, SMS_CCM here, and then BitLocker, and then logs. So we have our recovery service, and here's an SVC log. Let's just see what it says. All right, okay. So that's empty. Let's try another one. Yeah, okay. So nothing interesting, but still, those are SVC logs. They're out there if you need to know what's going on. We've already stopped at the MP control log, but I want to go back there for a minute because there's some interesting information there again. So back to the main config manager installation folder here. If I go into logs, then we have MP control. Oh, I've already shown you this, but still I'll show it to you again. So if we look at MP control, you're going to see that it does the deployment of the MBAM piece, right? So there it's checking for it here. It's verifying it there. It's deploying it, right? And this is also the log I showed you before that will test the MP to make sure it's going correctly. I showed you that we have the logs for the help desk and self-service portal. That's here under iNet Pub, under BitLocker, under logs, and we have the help desk and self-service. So those are also SVC logs, and those will help you in the event you have issues. I've shown you the event log, so I'm not going to go through that again. A few general comments. On the server side, don't modify installer scripts. You might be tempted to. I've shown you the installer scripts for the website. I've shown you for the recovery site. There is no problem with those scripts. Don't modify those. If you feel like you found some problem and you need to modify, then make sure you're talking with Microsoft support. Another key, make absolutely sure that you've installed ASP.NET MVC 4.0 on the server that is going to host the portal. And then I also pointed out earlier on the app pool that is built when you install the MBAM recovery service, do not ever, 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 ever change that from running as network service. All right. So I've shown you the event logs. There are certain codes that are useful in the event log. So I show them to you here. And I'm just going to scroll through them. Here's a link where you can find them. Right. So that's just to help you interpret things that might be going on if you indeed find something. Okay. And then back on the clients. So a lot of this is rehash as well. So I showed you the BitLocker management handler log on the client. That's where we're going to see the MBAM agent get installed. We're going to see the scope ID that we can then use to look up in the database. There's also a BitLocker management group policy handler log. So if you have GPO out there, that will be a question that I have to mention in a minute, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. It is fully supported to have Config Manager BitLocker running alongside GPO. The key is make sure that they agree in terms of settings. Otherwise, you'll get into a conflict. The other thing is, largely we're at parity now with the kind of settings that we can offer in BitLocker. So you probably don't need to continue with GPO, but it's out there and we are able to work with them no problem. So I've shown you the event logs too. Not going to go back through that. I showed you the registry key where you can find the recovery site that the client is trying to use. So that's really good to make sure that it's using the one from Config Manager and so on, right? And On the client side, one tip that I want to give you that I ran into a couple of times is make sure there's no bootable DVD in the DVD drive, because we will block the encryption action starting up. And then on the client event logs, there's also some interesting interpretation of the results that I share with you here. And I also give you the URL reference so you can see those since I scrolled by them so quickly. And then basically starting to wrap up, right? So I give you a link to the MBAM documentation. What you've seen here is not MBAM. This is Config Manager integration for BitLocker management. But still, being able to understand from the MBAM side may help you in some cases, so it's not bad to have that. On the MBAM group stuff, again, when you're installing the portals, make absolutely sure everything is right and is validated before you proceed. We don't check those groups. We just take what you give us. Know that Config Manager integration is the path forward. So you've seen as we've gone from 1910 to 2002 to 2006 to now 2010 and soon 2103, that we've enhanced the capabilities of BitLocker management all along the way. We'll do that until we get everything that folks need. I mentioned before that enhanced HTTP is not supported currently in 2010. It will be fully supported in 2103, so stay tuned for that. And then also migration. This is important to understand. The customer I work with all the time has used MBAM to manage their BitLocker deployment. The migration process from MBAM is seamless, right? Sometimes some questions come up and some scenarios come up. You know, for example, if you deploy Config Manager policy to a device that already has BitLocker drive encryption, is it going to re-encrypt those drives? The answer is no, it's not going to. We're not going to remove BitLocker protection of your device and then re-encrypt it. We'll let you know that the device is not compliant with your current configuration settings, but we're not going to trash the protection that is in place. We'll just let you know. Right? We're also not going to automatically have the TPM hash come in. So the way that works is it's a one-time send from TPM into whatever management body. If you started with MBAM, that would be where it would have been sent. You can cause that to resend. Basically, what you need to do is clear the hash, and go ahead and migrate to Config Manager Recovery Service, clear the TPM on the device, and then after it restarts, it will upload the new TPM password hash to the recovery service, just like you want, right? And so a little bit of a long journey here. Again, a number of moving parts, none of them scary. Don't be nervous about it at all. Definitely start down the road for BitLocker management with Config Manager. It's ready to go. And with that, we will end this session and see you next time.